In the quiet village of Black Hollow, nestled deep in the heart of an ancient forest, there were whispers of a beast. For years, the villagers had spoken of strange disappearances, brutal animal attacks, and eerie howls that echoed through the night. But none dared speak of the werewolf, the creature that haunted their nightmares. It was only a legend, or so they hoped. But legends have roots in truth. One cold autumn night, a stranger arrived in Black Hollow. His name was Elias, a drifter with wild eyes and a quiet demeanor. He never stayed in one place for too long, and this small village was just another stop on his endless journey. However, something about Black Hollow unsettled him in a way that no other place had before. The villagers watched him with suspicious eyes, muttering among themselves about the full moon that would soon rise. That night, as Elias found shelter in an old abandoned barn at the edge of the village, a sense of dread settled over him. He had felt this before, the tug, the pull, the transformation that awaited him. He had been cursed long ago, a werewolf doomed to wander the earth, shifting under the light of every full moon, unable to control the hunger that came with it. But this time, it felt different, darker. The air was thick with something ancient, something evil. The moon began to rise, casting an eerie silver glow over the landscape. Elias felt his bones shift, his skin stretch, his body elongate as the transformation overtook him. His human consciousness faded, replaced by the primal urge to hunt, to kill. But as he tore through the trees, his senses sharpened in a way they never had before. There was another presence in the forest. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the woods, not from him, but from something else. His blood ran cold, another werewolf, but this one wasn't like him. It was larger, its eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence. It had been waiting, watching. The two creatures circled each other, the tension building. Elias realized that this werewolf was not simply a cursed soul like himself, it was something much older, much darker, a harbinger of destruction. Before he could react, the other werewolf lunged, its fangs flashing in the moonlight. The two clashed, a flurry of fur and blood. Elias fought with all his might, but he was no match for this ancient beast. As its jaws clamped down on his shoulder, a searing pain shot through him. He could feel something more than physical wounds, a dark energy seeping into his very soul. In the midst of the battle, the sounds of howls began to rise from the village. Elias's ears twitched. More werewolves. A pack, perhaps. But as the howls grew louder, something became clear. They were different. They weren't the howls of creatures like him. They were mournful, enraged, cries of those who had been twisted by the same darkness that plagued this ancient forest. Black Hollow was cursed, and Elias had walked straight into its heart. As the ancient werewolf reared back for a final blow, a flash of silver sliced through the air. Elias, dazed and bleeding, saw a figure standing at the edge of the clearing, a gleaming sword in hand, a hunter, cloaked in shadows. The ancient werewolf let out a guttural roar before retreating into the trees, disappearing into the night. Elias, barely able to stand, met the eyes of the hunter. They were cold, unfeeling. The hunter stepped forward, sword still drawn, but instead of striking Elias down, they whispered, "You're not the one I want." Not yet. With that, the hunter turned and vanished into the darkness, leaving Elias alone in the blood-stained clearing. The moon was still high, but for the first time in his cursed existence, Elias felt a deeper fear than the beast inside him. Something was coming, and it wasn't just the ancient werewolf or the hunter. It was the village itself. Black Hollow was more than just a quiet village in the woods. It was a trap, and Elias had unwittingly become part of its dark game. Whatever was lurking in the shadows of the forest, it wasn't finished with him yet. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, Elias knew he had to uncover the truth behind Black Hollow before it consumed him. But with each passing day, he could feel the darkness growing inside him, threatening to take control. And in the distance, the howls began again. The hunt had only just begun. Elias staggered through the forest, his wounds slowly closing as the effects of his transformation ebbed. But the pain wasn't just physical. The encounter with the ancient werewolf and the mysterious hunter had unsettled him in ways he couldn't explain. Black Hollow was no ordinary village, and he knew deep down that this place had been waiting for him. As the sun crept higher, Elias found himself near the village square, his body still weak but his senses on high alert. The villagers moved about their daily routines, casting quick glances in his direction. There was something different about them today, a quiet tension, as if they were expecting something to happen. He noticed small charms and symbols hung in doorways, carved into wood and tied to trees. Protection wards. Against what? You're marked now, a voice said behind him. Elias spun around to see an old woman standing in the shadows of a nearby house. Her eyes were clouded with age, but her gaze was sharp and full of knowing. She was one of the few who had not been afraid to meet his eyes when he first arrived in Black Hollow. What do you mean? He asked, his voice rough from the transformation. The old woman stepped closer, her movements slow and deliberate. The curse runs deeper than you think. You were drawn here for a reason, but you're not the first. Black Hollow is a place where the cursed come to die, or to be reborn. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. What is this place? The woman's lips curled into a faint, bitter smile. A prison, the ancient werewolf you faced last night. It's one of many. There are others, creatures bound by the same darkness that binds you. But this village, it's controlled by something far worse. Something that uses us all as pawns in its game. Ilias's mind raced. He had faced many horrors in his time as a werewolf, but this was different. Who controls it? What does it want? The woman shook her head. No one knows, but the village isn't what it seems. At night, the boundaries blur, and the true face of Black Hollow reveals itself. The hunter you saw, he's been hunting for centuries, chasing after the heart of this place, but even he hasn't found it. Elias felt a surge of anger. He was tired of being hunted, tired of the endless cycle of blood and death. I'm leaving. Whatever curse this village holds, I won't be part of it. The old woman's expression darkened. There's no leaving. Not for you. Not for anyone. Before Elias could respond, a loud clang echoed from the village square. The bell tower, ancient and crumbling, tolled a slow, ominous chime. The villagers froze, their eyes wide with fear. Elias watched as they quickly retreated into their homes, locking their doors and windows. What's happening? He asked, heart pounding. The old woman didn't answer. Instead, she pointed toward the center of the village. Elias turned and saw something strange, a black fog, thick and unnatural, beginning to seep from the cracks in the cobblestones. It swirled slowly, creeping across the ground like a living thing. You must survive the night, the woman whispered, backing away into the shadows of her home. Survive, and you might learn the truth. The fog grew thicker, and with it came the sound of whispers, low, haunting voices that seemed to come from all directions. Ilias's pulse quickened. He wasn't sure if it was his werewolf instincts or something more primal, but every fiber of his being screamed at him to run. But where? There was no safe place in Black Hollow, and the fog was closing in fast. Out of the swirling darkness, figures began to emerge. Twisted, deformed shapes with glowing eyes and snarling mouths. They moved with unnatural speed, darting through the fog like phantoms. Ilias's hands trembled as his muscles tightened, the beast within him stirring once more. The night had begun, and the hunt was on. Without thinking, Elias ran toward the edge of the village, hoping to escape the fog. But the further he ran, the thicker it became, wrapping around him like a suffocating blanket. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, calling his name, taunting him with fragments of his past. Suddenly, the hunter appeared again, the same shadowed figure who had saved him from the ancient werewolf. His sword gleamed in the dim light, cutting through the fog with ease. You're still alive, he said, his voice cold and distant. Why are you doing this? Elias demanded, his anger flaring. What is this place? The hunter stepped closer, his face obscured by the shadows of his hood. This village was built on something ancient, something evil. It feeds on those like you, the cursed, the lost. You're part of its game now. Elias snarled, his patience thinning. Then why haven't you stopped it? The hunter hesitated. Because I can't. Not alone. Before Elias could ask what he meant, a deafening roar split the air. The ground beneath their feet trembled as a monstrous shape tore through the fog. It was the ancient werewolf, larger and more fearsome than before, its eyes burning with unholy fire. The hunter raised his sword, ready to strike, but the beast was too fast. It lunged at Elias, its claws raking across his chest. Pain exploded through his body, but as he staggered back, he felt something stir within him, a darkness, ancient and powerful, responding to the presence of the beast. Elias's vision blurred, and for a moment, he saw something beyond the village, a vast, shadowy realm where twisted creatures roamed, their eyes locked on him. And at the center of it all, a dark figure sat on a throne of bones, watching, waiting. The village of Black Hollow was just the beginning. As the ancient werewolf reared back for another strike, Elias's body surged with unnatural strength. The darkness inside him was awakening, and with it came a terrible realization. He wasn't just a pawn in this game. He was something far more dangerous. But what and why had Black Hollow chosen him? The fog swirled tighter, the creatures of the night closing in, but the answers remained elusive. All Elias knew was that the hunt was far from over, and the real horror had yet to be revealed. Elias could feel the darkness growing inside him, like an unstoppable tide rising to swallow him whole. The pain from the ancient werewolf's attack pulsed through his body, but it was nothing compared to the sickening power now coursing through his veins. The village of Black Hollow had awakened something inside him, something he could neither control nor understand. The hunter stood a few paces away, his sword still gleaming in the moonlight, but his eyes were filled with something that Elias hadn't seen before. Fear. "You have to fight it," the hunter said, his voice trembling. "Whatever it is inside you, you have to resist." But Elias could feel the pull, the seductive whisper of the ancient force that had been lurking beneath Black Hollow, now awakening inside him. His muscles bulged, his vision flickered between the forest clearing and that shadowy, twisted realm he had glimpsed moments earlier. In that otherworldly vision, the figure on the throne of bones watched him, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. It was too late. Elias wasn't resisting anymore. The ancient werewolf, now wounded from the battle, circled him warily, but Elias barely noticed. His gaze was fixed on the hunter. The dark energy inside him demanded release, demanded blood. His lips curled into a snarl, and before he realized what he was doing, Elias lunged at the hunter with terrifying speed. The hunter, taken by surprise, barely managed to raise his sword, but Elias was no longer just a werewolf. The darkness had transformed him into something far worse. With a guttural roar, he ripped the sword from the hunter's hand and hurled it aside, his claws sinking deep into the hunter's chest. The man gasped in agony, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You were supposed to stop it," the hunter choked, blood seeping from his lips. "You were supposed to fight it." Elias's only response was a low, bestial growl. With a final, brutal swipe, he tore the hunter apart, his body collapsing in a lifeless heap at Elias's feet. The ancient werewolf, seeing the carnage, backed away, its fiery eyes dimmed, not with fear, but with recognition. Whatever Elias had become, it was beyond anything the beast could challenge. With a mournful howl, the ancient werewolf vanished into the black fog, retreating into the forest where it had come from. But the fog didn't lift. If anything, it thickened, enveloping Elias in a suffocating shroud. The whispers returned, louder now, their voices filled with twisted glee. Elias could feel his mind slipping away, consumed by the malevolent force that now controlled him. He wasn't Elias anymore. He wasn't even the cursed werewolf that had wandered from village to village, searching for a way to end his torment. He was something else entirely, an avatar of the ancient darkness that ruled Black Hollow. The ground beneath him trembled, and the village began to shift. Black Hollow's true nature revealed itself. Buildings twisted, their walls oozing with shadows. The forest surrounding the village seemed to close in, its branches reaching like skeletal fingers, trapping Elias in the heart of a nightmarish labyrinth. He could hear the villagers screaming inside their homes, but it was distant, almost as if the sound came from another world. And then, through the fog, the dark figure on the throne of bones appeared once again, more clearly than before. Its eyes locked on Elias, and the whispers intensified. "Come," the figure beckoned. Without hesitation, Elias moved toward it, his body no longer his own. The ground shifted beneath his feet, but he barely noticed. All that mattered now was the dark figure, the master of Black Hollow. As he reached the throne, the figure stood, towering over him. Its form was cloaked in shadow, but Elias could see the glint of long, sharp teeth beneath the hood. It leaned close, its breath cold and foul. "You were chosen," it whispered, its voice dripping with malice. "And now you are mine." Elias fell to his knees, his mind fractured and broken. The last remnants of his humanity dissolved as the figure placed a cold, clawed hand on his head. "Welcome home," it said. The village of Black Hollow, once a quiet and forgotten place, was now alive with darkness. And Elias, once a cursed wanderer, had become the creature's puppet, the monster to haunt the endless night. The fog closed in around the village, swallowing it whole, and from within came the howls of the cursed and endless symphony of agony and despair. Black Hollow's curse would continue, and now Elias was part of its eternal nightmare. There was no escape, and no hope. Black Hollow had claimed another soul.